Several years ago, before I came to St. John, back to the Episcopal Church, I attended a Methodist church downtown Phoenix. And during the Martin Luther King birthday weekend, some parishioners were asked to read parts of his writings as a celebration at service. And I was asked to read part of his letter from the Birmingham jail in 1963. I want to share part of that letter with you now. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. Will we be extremists for hate, or will we be extremists for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice, or extremists for the cause of justice? In that dramatic scene on Calvary's Hill, 3 men were crucified. We must never forget that all 3 were crucified for the same crime, the crime of extremism. 2 were extremists for immorality, and thus fell below their environment. The other, Jesus Christ, was an extremist for love, truth, and goodness, and therefore rose above his environment. So after all, maybe the South, the nation, and the world are in dire need of creative extremists. I'd like to share with you a story about someone who I brought with me today. And I don't know if that person would call themselves an extremist, but certainly this person, like Dr. King, felt very strongly about changing lives, changing people's thoughts, and making a difference each and every day. This is the story of a young Black girl who was given several nicknames throughout her life. For the sake of this story, we'll use one of her nicknames. I want to introduce you to Daisy and some of these extreme events that shaped her future. Like Dr. King, Daisy was born in the South, in a small town filled with beautiful, tall pine trees and multicolored azaleas. As a matter of fact, her hometown was nicknamed Azalea, USA. The house she grew up in was small for a family of 7, but they had a huge yard filled with pear trees and a very well-kept vegetable garden. As a child, Daisy was often described as shy, timid, bashful, quiet, and humble, at least by her dad. She was the middle of 5 children, a sister and a brother on each end. She too, like Dr. King, was often teased about being a PK, a preacher's kid. Daisy didn't really consider herself poor, but she knew she wasn't rich. Her parents worked extremely hard to provide food and clothing for their 5 children. Her mother was a cook at the local seminary where her father once attended when he entered the ministry. The family didn't have a lot of extra money for school supplies or school activities, but their mother always found a way to make things happen. Daisy's father was a minister with 2 small churches, and that alone could not support a large family. So he held a full-time job as a supervisor at a lumber mill about 50 miles from their home. During the weekdays, he would stay in that town just to save on traveling expenses. Although a man of few words and smiles, Daisy's father ruled with an iron fist. She and her siblings were afraid of him most of their childhood, but their mother had a great sense of humor. They taught their children to work hard, to be the best, to respect themselves and others, to look for the good in people first, and to dare to be different. And Daisy took that part seriously. So as a teenager, she developed a personality that became one of creativity, wittiness, friendliness, being funny, and even being called perky. Daisy really just thought of herself as a skinny Black girl with a big smile who wanted to make other people happy. She loved seeing people smile, because when people smiled, it made everything seem good. As a child, she loved getting dressed up in her mother's hats and high heels. She would spend hours at playtime modeling in front of the mirror. She always wanted to look good because she thought people would like her better. Well, Daisy didn't have a lot. She seldom got new shoes or dress, mostly at Easter time. She spent most of her childhood and teenage years wearing her older sister's hand-me-downs. And Daisy promised that one day, when she could afford it, she would buy beautiful things. Daisy was a big dreamer. She thought about how she would travel the world and help others along her journey. She, like Dr. King, wanted to meet people and help to change their thoughts and their lives. She felt it was in God's plan for her to make this world a better place and to make a difference. Daisy probably would never consider herself an extremist, but at the age of 16, she made what some might categorize as an extreme decision that would change her life forever. With all the hard work of Dr. King and others during the civil rights movement, events in the South slowly began to change. It was one day in the spring of 1966 that Daisy's parents got a letter from the school system. Finally, the schools in her state were going to desegregate. It was a big step for any state in the South at that time. There was much talk about it on TV and in the newspapers. Most parents of white kids were not very happy, and the black kids' parents were not really sure what that meant, and they were concerned about their children's safety. Daisy's parents wanted them to understand the importance of this decision, so her mother talked about it in detail. By this time, only Daisy and her two younger siblings were at home. Her oldest sister was in college, and her older brother was serving in Vietnam. Well, for Daisy, there wasn't really much to think about. Go to school with the white kids? I can do that. You see, for Daisy, she felt this was a way to get to know about other people. Someone not like her, or maybe like her. Maybe this was going to be a way to bridge the gap between the blacks and the whites in her town. This was going to be a way to share similarities and not focus on differences. I guess you would say she was starting to sound like an extremist for change. She was willing to take the risk and to see where the new journey would take her. Once her decision was made, her parents stood by her and said a lot of prayers. As this new school year approached in August of 1966, Daisy started feeling very nervous. Her stomach was constantly filled with butterflies, and she'd become so worried about that decision she made earlier that spring. This was supposed to be a fun and exciting time for a teenager. She was going to be a junior in high school. When she thought about it, Daisy was giving up a lot. At her black high school, she was very popular. She was involved in lots of clubs. She was in the honor society, and she was also the lead majorette in her marching band. She also had only a 6-block walk to school. She was going to be leaving all of her dear friends, particularly her best friend, Teresa, who she met the first day of first grade, as they were both crying and hanging on to the teacher's leg. Well, the decision was made, and Daisy was going to stick with it. It was off to the new white high school. She was gaining a new campus, new school colors, and even a new school mascot. Her new school was huge. The enrollment was over 500 students, which is about quadruple the size of her black high school. The school year finally began. As the students gathered on campus that first morning, so did Daisy and the other 10 black students who made the decision. Daisy was surprised the number was so low. But in the black community, no one wanted to talk about making a decision to leave their high school, so it was sort of a secret. Much to Daisy's surprise on that first day, as black students were walking on campus, she found that her best friend, Teresa, made the same life-changing decision that she did. That solidified their friendship even more. Slowly, every morning, they stood in the same spot, The Black students would gather near the back of the campus to talk, to laugh, to share stories, and sometimes even to cry. That spot was theirs. It was their safety zone to make it through the day. As Daisy recalled in conversations with her family and friends who wanted to know how her experience was going, she shared with them that the first few months were horrible. The Black students were yelled at, spat upon, called racial slurs. They were just shoved and pushed in the hallway. They had to do all they could each day to make it through classes. It got so bad that one of the Black students returned to his former high school within 2 weeks. The bond that formed between the remaining 10 students was unbreakable. They were not turning back. Daisy tried to make the best of her first year in the new school by joining clubs and trying out for the marching band, as she did at her former high school. She was rejected for all of these, but eventually she landed on the newspaper's staff. Maybe this was a way that she could be heard. She had a message to deliver, and she was determined to get it out. She had lots of time to think about how she was going to make a difference and be effective in the lives of others. Her walk to school every morning was about 3 miles, compared to 6 blocks at her former school. Although several crowded yellow school buses passed her by, they did not pick up Black students. So Daisy just walked. It was during her morning walks that Daisy became more resolute in her desire to change people and their thoughts. In this small, beautiful southern town with large, pristine buildings and flower-laden sidewalks, Daisy encountered the same sight every morning. It was a sight that would become etched in her memory for decades. In the middle of the town, there was a laundromat. And that laundromat had a big rectangular sign at the top of the doorway that read, "White only." It really bothered Daisy every time she passed that sign. Of course, the laundromat was not far away from the doctor's office that had the white entrance and the colored entrance. Daisy continued to believe that she had to make a difference. She wanted to change minds and hearts, and she wanted to get to know people, to know who she is. She wanted to know other people, because she felt if people got to know each other, there'd be less hatred and prejudice. During that first year of integration, Daisy and most of the other Black students struggled to keep up with their classes, but they didn't give up. They stayed the course. It was worth it. One morning at a school assembly, much to Daisy's surprise, she, along with 2 other Black students, were inducted into the school's honor society. They were the first, and it was a moment to remember. Although the cheering only came from a few students in the auditorium that morning, it didn't matter to Daisy. She couldn't wait to get home to tell her parents. As the year came to a close, things slowly began to change for the better. Daisy felt hopeful, and one day while sitting in a classroom, she felt that things had truly turned the corner when a friendly white girl who sat behind her struck up a conversation. Her name was Alicia, and the 2 girls subsequently developed a friendship as they learned more about each other and their plans for the future. They found out they weren't really different at all. It was now the fall of 1967, and Daisy's senior year was finally here. She had been thinking about all the exciting events that would unfold during her senior year, like the football games, the prom, the Honor Society convention, her search for a college, and so on. Although her senior year was not without its ups and downs, Daisy had a better handle on things. Her grades were good, and she was making new friends. Soon, though, she was reminded of how tough life can be, even for a teenager. One of the most painful events for Daisy happened in the spring of her senior year, just before graduation. One morning while in homeroom class, she overheard her friend Alicia talk to another classmate about what fun they had at the school prom that past weekend. What? The prom? You mean the prom is over? You see, Daisy's mother was making a prom dress for her to wear to the special event. Before the dress was even finished, the prom was over. Daisy later found out that the school held the prom, but deliberately did not invite any of the black students. Well, Daisy no doubt was crushed, and this was probably one of those moments that led her to make another extreme decision about her plans for the future. After many months of trying to pick a college, Daisy had made a decision. It was very clear to her parents where she was going to go. It was not the same for Daisy. Daisy wanted to go out of state. Her parents gave her the bad news that they were not paying out-of-state tuition. With her parents' limited income, Daisy had to attend the same college where her older siblings went. She finally got the idea that she wasn't leaving the state, so she accepted it. But she also realized that she was probably looking forward to being in a more social and friendly environment in college. She felt that the last 2 years of high school gave her a great foundation from which to build a future. So she was looking forward to interacting with kids who were more like her. Daisy felt she needed the comfort and support of a historical black college to help heal the wounds of her last 2 years of high school. So in the fall of 1968, it was off to college. Even during her college years, Daisy focused on making a difference. She got involved in several groups, activities, joined a sorority, and in her sophomore year, even got engaged. She was so popular on campus that she was elected queen of her college in her senior year. So 4 years later, after college, armed with a degree and a marriage license, she was on her way, thinking big, changing lives, and helping others. As an adult, Daisy was fortunate to have a long and what some would consider successful career in a field that she loved. For over 30 years, she got to go different places, to meet different people, all walks of life. God gave her a gift of teaching others, and she fell in love with it from the start. Now today, Daisy trains employees to be the best that they can be, something that her mother taught her. And she trains leaders to be the best leader that they can be. Daisy feels in a small way, she's making a difference in the lives of others every day. Now, words to describe Daisy include teacher, coach, mentor, supporter, advocate. Daisy's life goes on. She looked at all the events that shaped her as an opportunity to grow. She never regretted changing high schools because it got her where she is today. Also, although Daisy would not think of herself as an extremist, she did make some extreme decisions, and she found pleasure in being a risk taker. There are many other Daisies out there, people who want to see justice, who want to do what's right, and who want to make a difference by caring for and loving others, just as Jesus demonstrated. So I go back to Dr. King's letter. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremist will we be? Will we be an extremist for hate or extremist for love? Will we be extremist for the preservation of injustice, or will we be extremists for the cause of justice? So, after all, maybe the South, the nation, and the world are in dire need of creative extremists. I said to you at the beginning of this that Daisy had many nicknames. Her uncle named her after a famous gospel singer, Mahalia. Her friends in high school called her Perky because her last name was Perkins. Her late husband called her Haley and Hillary. A college co-worker in Chicago nicknamed her Daisy Mae. Now everyone just calls her Mae. Amen.